Welcome to Lesson 3, Part A, and in this lesson we deal with arrays. So, what are arrays? An array is an ordered list of values of some length. And we'll take an example in a few seconds. These values that are in the array must all be of the same type. So the array can have all integers, or you could have all floating point numbers, or you could have all strings. The key point here is that in this ordered list of array, they can only be of the same type. If you want to mix the type of the elements in the array, then you have to create an array of arrays where you'll have one type of array in another array, but that's more advanced features. Now, an array is also called a type of collection, and we have different types of collections. Arrays are one type of collection. We also have another type of collection called a dictionary, which we will study in Part B. So arrays and dictionaries are part of a bigger term called collections. So let's get stuck into an example of an array. Okay. Now, in this example, I'm creating an array called candy jar, where I'm going to put in some sweets or chocolates into this candy jar. It's an array, and I'm initializing the array, and I'm starting off by putting three types of candies into this jar: peppermints, gummy bears, and Snickers. And you'll notice that these elements in the array are of type string. I didn't explicitly state that it's of type string, but the compiler can infer that these elements that are going to go into the array are of type string. So I've put in peppermints, gummy bears, and Snickers, and since they are strings, they need to be in inverted commas, and they're separated by commas. You'll also notice that I have the keyword let in here. So this array is what we call a constant array. Once I've put in the values into this array, I cannot change or modify these values. So this is what we call a constant array. Or another word for constant, we say that this array is an immutable array. It cannot be changed. It's unchangeable. Once the values go in, we cannot modify the values in the array. It's a constant array or an immutable array. Now, every value in the array has a position in the array or an index value. So peppermints is the first value in the array. It's in index number 0. Gummy bears is the second value in the array, so its index number is 1. And Snickers is the third value in the array. Its index number is 2. So we always start from 0 being the first value in the array, 1 being the second value in the array, and 2 being the third value in the array. Or another way of looking at it, you take the total amount of elements in the array minus 1 from it, and that will be the highest index number, with 0 being the first index number. Now, once we've got values in the array, we can also output those values onto the screen. So if I want the first value in the array, which is peppermints, its index number is 0. So I say candy jar index number 0, and you'll see that it prints out peppermints. If I want to print out the second value in the array, I say candy jar 1, index 1, gummy bears. And if I want to print the last value in the array, which is index number 2, I type in candy jar index number 2, and it prints out Snickers. So that was an example of how we would declare an array, a constant array, and put some initial values into the array. and constants cannot change. Now, how about creating an array that has variables in it whose items can change over the course of the program? So here I'm declaring another array called another candy jar, and I'm putting in 3 initial values, which are also strings: Galaxy Chocolates, M&Ms, and Milky Way. And you'll notice that I have the keyword var, or variable. This means that this array is a variable array, or in other words, this array is a mutable array. I can change the values of this array, delete values, or add in new values into this array. So I've got these 3 initial values, and if I want to output them in the same way, I need to know the index number of each value in the array, and it will output those values in the array. Now, since this is a mutable array, another candy jar is a mutable array or a variable array, a var array, I can change the value in the array. So in position number 1, I already have M&Ms. If I want to change the value in position number 1 in this array called another candy jar, I state the index number and I put in the new value. So what's going to happen here is that KitKat is going to take the position in index number 1 and replace the M&Ms. And here I'm just printing out the values that are in this new updated array, and you'll say M&Ms are not there anymore, and KitKat has replaced the M&Ms in position number 1 or index 1. I can also add new values to the array. Now, when we add new items to the array, that is called appending. Yeah. What appending does, it adds a new item to the array, and this new item is added at the end of the array. It becomes the last item in the array. So we use the append method or function, and we say another candy jar array dot, we use the append function, and we append or add candy canes to the array. And you'll see that the array now has candy canes on the array. Okay, let's try and have a look at that. There we go. So Galaxy, you'll see that it had Galaxy Chocolate, we put in KitKat, and then it had Milky Way, and we've appended candy canes, which is now the last item in the array. The array now has 4 values. We can also remove a value from the array, and to do that we use this method called remove at index. So I would like to remove KitKat from the array, which is in position number 1. So I type in another candy jar dot remove at index 1, and you'll see that when I print out the new modified array, that KitKat is no longer there in position number 1. So it's removed KitKat and then moved all the items down and covered that space that was left by KitKat. So Milky Way now takes the position of KitKat. So once an item is deleted, the other items in the array shift their position to compact the array. Now sometimes during the course of the program, you do not know, the programmer does not have track of how many values are in the array, or what is the index of the last value in the array. If you don't know that, but you do want to remove the last value in the array, but you're not sure what the index is, you could use this method called remove last. So you type in another candy jar dot type in this method called remove last, and it will remove whatever the last value was, it will remove it. In our case, the last value was candy canes, so it will remove that value from the array. And you notice now that my array only has two values, Galaxy chocolates and Milky Way, because candy canes being the last value was removed from the array. It's also possible to insert a value at a specific location. So in location number 1, in location number 0 I have Galaxy chocolates, and in location number 1 I have Milky Way. If you wanted to insert a new value in position number 1 or index number 1, you would use this method called insert. So you type in another candy jar insert method, and the new value that you want to insert, which is $12, at which position? At index number 1. So it will go into the array, go into position number 1 and insert $12. So you'll see it has now inserted $12 and then moved Milky Way up one position. It's also possible to combine two arrays to make a new array. So you remember that when you first started this part of this lesson, we had a constant array called candy jar, and then we made another array which was a variable array called another candy jar. Now what I'm doing here is I'm combining the two arrays, candy jar and another candy jar, and creating a new array called new candy jar. So what it's going to do, it's going to take all the elements from one array and combine it with all the elements from the second array and make a new array and insert those elements into the new array. The original arrays remain unchanged. So now I have three arrays, two existing arrays and one new array called new candy jar. Now sometimes you'd want to start off with an array, but you're not too sure what the initial values are, or you want to start off with a blank array or declare an empty array, and during the course of the program you will insert values into this new array or blank array. These are two ways to declare an empty array. So here I'm declaring a variable array called my empty array. In fact, it has to be a variable. It cannot be a constant blank empty array, because you're going to add new values to it. So it has to be of type variable var. So here I'm declaring a new array with no values in them, just a blank empty array called my empty array, and I use the keyword array, and I'm saying to the compiler that in this array I'm only going to store integers, and the open bracket and close square brackets here means that there are no elements or zero elements in the array initially, and you'll see here it also says 0 elements. Here's another way of declaring an empty array. You type in var, the name of the array, equal to, and int here being the type of elements that are going to go into the array. Good, so that was arrays. Now before I move on with some advanced features of arrays, I just want to explain to you this command called the print line command. Now the print line command allows us to output data onto the screen. It allows us to print some messages, or it allows us to print some variables, or a combination of variables and messages onto the screen. So let's take this example. Suppose I want to print out this message. This is a message onto the screen. I type in print line, open bracket, put in my message in inverted commas and close bracket. This allows me to print out a message onto the screen. It's very useful if you want to test your program to check certain outputs. Let's take another use of the print line. Sometimes you want to print out a constant or a variable value. So here I'm declaring a variable called num1. I'm giving it the initial value of 9. And I want to now print out num1, which is 9. So you do it like this. You say print line and put in the variable name, and it'll print out the contents of that variable. Now what if you want to combine printing out a message or a string of characters and a variable? You could use print line like this. You could say print line. You can type in your message, right? The number is equal to, and when it's time to print out a variable, put in a backslash, open bracket, put in the variable name in close bracket, and then inverted commas. So here we're using the print line in a mixed way. We are printing out a message and a variable, and when you want to print out the variable, put a backslash and make sure the variable name is enclosed in brackets. So that was the print line function or method. Now Swift allows us to, once we've got the array and we've got elements in the array, Swift allows us to look at every item in the array and then perform some function. So if we have to look at every item in the array, that is called array iteration. So array iteration involves looking at each value in the array and performing some sort of function. Now in this code below, I'm going to look at every value in the array called another candy jar, and so go through every index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the value that it finds at each index, I'm going to output that value. Now Swift provides a series of statements called the for in. Now let's take a look at how that works. So I've got for candy in this array called another candy jar. So it's going to look at every value or every index in this array called another candy jar, and then it's going to print this message: I enjoy eating, and candy here is the value at that index. So this variable here can be any identifier you want to put in. You could put in sweet, or you could put in any value you want to. So this is an arbitrary identifier here. So it's going to look into this array and iterate, go through every single index and print out what's at that index, or the contents of the entire array. Now since in another candy jar I only have 3 values or items in the array, it says that it's going to do this statement. It's like a loop, it's like a for loop that's going to run through the whole course of the array. So this loop is going to run 3 times because there's only 3 values in the array. And to see what it's going to print out, you go into your console here and you click on here, and it's going to print out I enjoy Galaxy chocolates, which is index 0. I enjoy eating twirlers, which is index number 1, and I enjoy eating Milky Way, which is at index number 2. So that's how it's possible to print out every single value in the array by using the for in set of statements. Let's try another example. In this example, I'm also using for in, but a different variation of for in. Here I'm going to print out the index value, which is 0, and what's living at index value 0, or the item living at index 0. And then I'm going to print out index value 1 and what item is living at index number 1. So it's going to print out the index values, and it's going to print out the item at those index values. So we use this series of statements for index. So index is the index number, and candy is the value that's stored at that index. In enumerate another candy jar, which is the name of the array, And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to issue a print line command. Then I'm going to type in the message candy. Then I'm going to print out the value at that index is in position backslash and the index number of the array. So here I have a mix of a message, candy being the value at an index, at that index point, and index being the index number, and another piece of message here of the array. And here again it's going to run 3 times because there are 3 values in the array. So what can we expect to see? We can expect to see the value that's stored in an index, and also at which position or index that value is stored at. Let's check. Go to the right hand side here to my console, click on this little circle, and you'll see the output here. Candy Galaxy Chocolates is in position 0 of the array, Candy Twirlers is in position 1 of the array, and Candy Milky Way is in position 2 of the array. So this series of commands for enumerate is useful if you want to print out both the index number and the value stored at that index number. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, part A, that dealt with arrays. When we get back in the next part, we'll deal with dictionaries.